ports went quiet before dawn. Cranes froze mid-air, containers stacked like mute tombstones. Somewhere between Tianjin and Texas, trade turned into a weapon, and the shockwave has not finished traveling. A motorcade slices through a rain-glossed boulevard in northern China. Inside the convoy, Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, Vladimir Putin, three leaders who rarely share a stage, now gathered under one roof, just days after the United States doubled tariffs on Indian goods. The choreography feels deliberate. The message is simple. If Washington closes a door, Eurasia is ready to open a gate. And yet, in the silence between speeches, a deeper question hangs heavy. Is this a summit about security, or a blueprint for the world after tariffs? Let's start with the rupture. The White House has imposed 50% tariffs on Indian goods, a dramatic escalation justified under the familiar banner of America First. The stated reason: India's continued purchase of discounted Russian oil while the war in Ukraine grinds on. The subtext: hardball geopolitics. Pressure Moscow by punishing its buyers, even if one of them is a long-courted U.S. partner. Tariffs are taxes on imports, but in the 21st century they also function as broadcast messages, signals to voters, warnings to rivals, leverage in negotiations. The new duties hit a wide sweep of Indian exports, from textiles and seafood to jewelry and light manufacturing, sectors that employ millions and feed supply chains across the West. Administration officials frame the move as a corrective to unfair trade and a matter of national security. In their telling, deficits are vulnerabilities, dependency is danger, and tariffs are a shield. But there's a legal drama running parallel to the economic one. A U.S. federal appeals court has largely rejected the idea of universal, across-the-board tariffs justified by a permanent emergency, even as it allowed the new regime to remain in force for now pending further appeal. So the policy stands, but on contested ground. Industry can't plan with confidence, ports can't price with certainty, and allies can't map commitments with clarity. And that uncertainty is where diplomacy rushes in. India's first response was political theater with real stakes. "We will neither bow down nor ever appear weak," said Trade Minister Piyush Goyal, signaling defiance and a pivot. If America closes its market, New Delhi will capture new markets. That line lands differently when you know where Prime Minister Modi was headed: Tianjin, for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) summit, his first visit to China in 7 years. The optics are stark. India and China have sparred along a high, icy border and across hot, strategic seas. Now, in the shadow of tariffs, the two sides are resuming direct flights, talking about agreements on border management, and unfreezing stalled channels for trade and travel. Beijing, for its part, is casting itself as stabilizer-in-chief, lifting curbs on rare earths, fertilizers, and key machinery for India, telling the Global South that multilateralism still has a home address, even if it isn't in Washington. Is this a full strategic realignment? Not yet. India has invested decades in strategic autonomy, hedging, balancing, never binding itself to any one bloc. But tariffs have a way of concentrating the mind. Inside the SCO tent, alongside Russia, Iran, Central Asia, and a widening ring of dialogue partners, India can scout alternative corridors, local currency trade, and a thicker set of options if Western doors slam again. No one needed to say the word BRICS. It was present in every handshake. Tariffs aim to protect American industry and punish strategic behavior abroad. In the short term, they raise the landed cost of goods Americans actually buy. That can mean higher prices on everyday items and margin pressure for small and mid-sized U.S. importers that rely on Indian supply, apparel brands that source cotton and ready-made garments, food distributors that carry seafood and specialty staples, jewelers that assemble and finish pieces using Indian craftsmanship. Could U.S. factories backfill? In some niches, yes, but in many labor-intensive segments, capacity doesn't exist domestically at scale. The likely result is supply chain rerouting, from India to alternatives like Bangladesh, Vietnam, or Mexico, which doesn't always translate into American jobs. Meanwhile, U.S. firms with investments in India face contract turbulence, and sectors counting on Indian growth, digital services, green energy components, will price in policy risk. For India, the immediate pain concentrates in export-heavy states and labor-intensive industries. Reports of cancelled orders have already surfaced, and job losses are the specter everyone wants to avoid. That's why New Delhi's messaging is all acceleration, support packages, market diversification, and a diplomatic surge aimed at Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. If the U.S. is going to be unpredictable, India needs multiple pillars. At the same time, the tariff shock has broken a psychological barrier. India and China, the world's two most populous countries, are not just talking about peace on the border. They're reopening air links, exploring supply arrangements, and testing managed competition instead of permanent confrontation. Add Russia's energy calculus and Iran's corridor ambitions, and you begin to see why the SCO stage suddenly matters. Globally, this is a story about optionality. The more tariffs the U.S. throws, the more non-dollar trade lanes look attractive. Rupee settlements, yuan clearances, barter-like swaps of energy for goods. No one is ending the dollar, but many are building around it, just in case. Ports in Shanghai, Tianjin, and Bandar Abbas watch for volume that once moved through Los Angeles and New York. Insurance premiums adjust to political risk. Freight contracts add tariff triggers. In the short run, volatility is the only constant. In the long run, businesses crave predictability, and they will seek it where it's offered, even if that means rewiring the map. It's tempting to file the SCO under talk shop, but power is part policy and part performance. In Tianjin, China has stacked the stage with an audience drawn from the global south, captured the cameras, and sent a clear signal. If the UN, IMF, and WTO feel gridlocked, there are other rooms where deals can be cut and handshakes can be broadcast. The US is not isolated, but it is busy everywhere. A trade fight here, a sanctions package there, a security pledge somewhere else. Ships idle in American ports while new routes open in Shanghai. That is the cinematic image America's rivals want you to remember. Putin calls it consolidating solidarity. Xi calls it partners, not rivals. Modi calls it strategic autonomy. Each slogan masks a sharper edge, but together they form a caption under one photograph. Multipolarity. Watch the Quad, the dialogue among India, Japan, Australia, and the U.S. If India's room to maneuver widens because of tariffs, the Quad's center of gravity will shift. Not collapse, shift. Expect hedged communiques, careful phrasing, and an intensified behind-the-scenes scramble as Washington works to shore up ties without retreating from tariff brinkmanship. Meanwhile, the WTO's ability to arbitrate sweeping disputes looks brittle. The IMF's voice on global spillovers grows louder but less heated, and the UN remains a stage where speeches are made but supply chains are rerouted elsewhere. That contrast, the formal institutions versus the functional corridors, is the real story of 2025. In Tianjin, the choreography is elegant. Parade now, pipelines later, speeches today, standards tomorrow. The SCO summit is less a destination than a waypoint, a place where nations battered by tariffs test drive a different alignment. Whether it lasts will depend on what happens when the cameras leave, when the flights resume, when the first post-tariff contracts are inked in Mumbai, Shenzhen, and Doha. But one line is already etched into the year. America wasn't pushed out. It was quietly replaced. transaction by transaction, corridor by corridor, handshake by handshake. Tariffs lit the fuse. Multipolarity carried the flame. If tariffs are the loud part of geopolitics, realignment is the quiet part. And it's unfolding right now. Do you think this strategy protects American workers or accelerates a world that trades without the U.S. at the center? Subscribe for deep dives that cut through headlines. Share this with someone who still thinks globalization runs on autopilot, and drop your take below. Is the SCO's stagecraft a bluff, or the opening scene of a new order?